There are moments that forge a legend. They are rarely grand battles or epic discoveries. More often they are small, quiet choices that ripple outwards, reshaping the future in ways no one could predict. On the colony world of Xylos, that moment didn't come from the barrel of a plasma rifle or the signing of a treaty. It came from the heart of a 17-year-old boy. His name was Leo Vance, and as he stood on the banks of the alien Chroma River, he faced a choice: conform to the fear and disgust of two species, or commit an act of social suicide to save a creature that everyone, human and alien alike, believed was better off dead. His decision would not just save a life, it would unravel a lie that had poisoned an entire world. Prospect's Landing was a monument to tenacity. Carved into the rust-red soil of Xylos, the small human settlement was a cluster of pressurized domes and prefabricated alloy buildings huddled against the colossal, crystalline flora of the alien world. For 5 years it had been a fragile foothold for humanity. In the Attican sector, a place of hard work, thin air, and an uneasy truce with the planet's dominant sentient species, the Cathar. The Cathar were tall insectoid beings with obsidian carapaces and a society built on rigid efficiency and unwavering adherence to tradition. They had allowed the human colony to exist under a strict set of protocols, viewing the soft-skinned mammals with a mixture of detached curiosity and mild contempt. Humans were messy, emotional, and inefficient, but they were also useful. 17-year-old Leo Vance felt the weight of that contempt every day. His family had arrived on the last transport, making them the newest and most scrutinized residents. His father, Mark Vance, a terraforming engineer, constantly preached the importance of fitting in. "Don't make waves, Leo. We are guests here. We follow their rules, we respect their customs, and we keep our heads down." Today, however, keeping his head down was proving impossible. The entire settlement, or what passed for its public square, was gathered near the banks of the Chroma River. The river wasn't water. It was a sluggish, viscous fluid that shimmered with a perpetual hypnotic rainbow, slick a byproduct of the native microbial life. It was beautiful, but dangerous. The currents were deceptive, and the fluid itself was a biological cocktail no human could survive in for long without a suit. The center of attention was a creature trapped in the shallows, snagged on a submerged, crystalline outcrop. It was a glimmerfin. To the humans, the glimmerfin was repulsive. About the size of a large dog, it had a gelatinous, semi-translucent body that pulsed with a faint, sickly bioluminescence. Its skin was a mottled grey-green, like something that had decayed underwater. It had too many limbs, 6 to be exact, that ended in webbed finger-like appendages. But its worst feature was its head, a smooth, dome-like structure with a cluster of a dozen unblinking sapphire-blue eyes that seemed to stare into your soul with a profound, unnerving sadness. To the Cathar, the glimmerfin was worse than repulsive. It was anathema. They called it skittering blight. Their traditions, thousands of years old, painted the glimmerfins as vermin of the highest order, unclean carriers of disease and misfortune. A Cathar would sooner self-immolate than willingly touch one. Their children were taught to stone them on sight. This one was clearly in distress. One of its limbs was tangled in the sharp, glass-like fingers of the crystal formation. With every weak struggle, it tore its gelatinous flesh, and a darker, oily substance bled into the already kaleidoscopic river. A low, clicking whimper escaped it, a sound that grated on the auditory senses of both humans and Cathar. A group of Cathar stood at a safe distance, their multifaceted eyes expressing a cold, clinical disgust. Their leader, Prefect Vorlag, a towering Cathar, whose carapace was etched with symbols of authority, had already issued his judgment. The blight has ensnared itself. The river will claim it. It is the efficient solution. The humans murmured in agreement. No one was going to risk their life or diplomatic standing for that. "It's grotesque," whispered Sarah Jenkins, a woman who worked in the hydroponics bay with Leo's mother. "Look at it. It's like a tumor came to life." Leo's father put a firm hand on his shoulder. "Look away, son. This has nothing to do with us." But Leo couldn't look away. He saw past the gelatinous skin and the unnerving eyes. He saw the panicked, desperate thrashing. He saw the slow exhaustion taking over. He saw a living thing scared and in pain. The whimpering sound didn't grate on him. It broke his heart. It sounded like a lost child. He remembered a stray dog he'd tried to save back on Earth, hit by a transport. Everyone had told him to leave it, that it was a lost cause. He had stayed with it until the end, and the memory of its fading warmth in his arms had never left him. This felt the same. A profound, gut-wrenching injustice. "We can't just let it die," Leo said, his voice louder than he intended. Prefect Vorlag's head swiveled towards him, the movement sharp and precise. "Your emotionalism is noted, human boy. And it is irrelevant. The natural order is correcting itself." "That's not the natural order," Leo shot back, pulling away from his father's grip. "It's trapped. It's not a correction. It's an accident." "Leo, stop it." Now Mark Vance hissed, his face pale with fear and anger. He grabbed his son's arm, but Leo wrenched it free. The crowd, both human and Cathar, was staring at him now. He was making waves. Big ones. The Glimmerfin let out another pained click, its movements growing weaker. Its many eyes were beginning to dim. Something inside Leo snapped. It was the injustice. It was the cold, calculated indifference of the Cathar. It was the cowardly compliance of his own people. It was the memory of a dying dog on a cold city street millions of miles away. He didn't think. He just acted. Before his father could react, before the Cathar could process the sheer insanity of the act, Leo sprinted the last few feet to the riverbank. He kicked off his boots, tore off his jacket, and without a moment's hesitation, he jumped. The shock of the Chroma River was instantaneous and brutal. It was colder than ice and thick as oil. It clung to him, a heavy, suffocating blanket. The iridescent slick coated his skin, and an alien tang like ozone and rotting fruit filled his senses. The crowd gasped. His father screamed his name, but Leo only had eyes for the dying creature. He pushed through the viscous liquid, his muscles screaming in protest. His destination, the cluster of unblinking blue eyes that were now fixed on him with something that looked terrifyingly like hope. The Chroma River fought him every inch of the way. It wasn't like swimming in water, it was like wading through liquid gravity. Each stroke was a monumental effort, the thick fluid dragging at his limbs, seeping into his clothes, and making him impossibly heavy. The cold was a living thing, sinking its teeth deep into his bones. As he got closer to the Glimmerfin, a new sensation began, a strange, tingling numbness starting in his hands and feet. The water, or was it the creature itself? He remembered the Cathar legends that the Glimmerfins secreted a neuroslime, a substance that caused confusion sickness and eventually madness. He pushed the thought away. Fear was a luxury he couldn't afford. The Glimmerfin had stopped struggling. Its dozen eyes followed his approach, their sapphire depths unreadable. Was it fear gratitude, or just the vacant stare of a dying animal? He reached the crystalline outcrop. The edges were razor-sharp, and he felt a searing pain in his side as he brushed against a submerged spur. He ignored it. The creature's limb was horribly twisted, caught between two crystal fingers. The gelatinous flesh was torn open, revealing a strange, fibrous internal structure. "It's okay." Leo grunted his teeth, chattering uncontrollably. "I'm here to help you." He reached out. His fingers touched its skin. It was shockingly smooth, like cool, wet silicone. But beneath the surface, he could feel a faint, rhythmic vibration, like a deep hum. The moment he made contact, a wave of dizziness washed over him. His vision blurred at the edges, and a phantom chorus of whispers echoed in the back of his mind. The neuro-slime. He fought it, focusing on the task. He couldn't break the crystal, so he had to free the limb. He wrapped both hands around the trapped appendage and tried to gently work it loose. The creature whimpered a high-frequency click that vibrated through its body and into his hands. With the sound came another wave of disorientation, stronger this time. He saw a flash of an image behind his eyes, a dark, warm cavern filled with pulsing blue light. "Get out of my head," he thought, shaking his own to clear it. He changed tactics, bracing his feet against the main crystal shaft he pulled. He pulled with every ounce of strength he had, the muscles in his back and arms screaming in agony. The Glimmerfin's body tensed. For a terrifying second, Leo thought he was just tearing it apart. Then, with a soft, sickening pop, the limb slid free. The creature was untangled, but it was limp, barely conscious. The current, weak as it was, began to pull it away. Leo lunged, wrapping his arms around its surprisingly dense body. He was now supporting its full weight, and the contact was overwhelming. The tingling numbness spread up his arms and legs, and the whispers in his mind grew louder, turning into a cacophony of what felt like panicked, overlapping voices. He kicked his legs, trying to propel them back to shore. It was a desperate, clumsy effort. He was losing strength fast, the cold and the river's viscosity draining his energy. His head was pounding, just a little further. Hands suddenly grabbed his arms, hauling him out of the viscous ooze. His father Mark and 2 other men from the colony dragged him and his strange burden onto the red soil of the riverbank. Leo collapsed, gasping, shivering his body, feeling both numb and on fire at the same time. He had done it. The Glimmerfin lay beside him, a heap of mottled grey-green flesh. It was alive. One of its webbed hands twitched, then slowly, deliberately, it reached out and rested on Leo's arm. The touch was cool and gentle. The chaos in his head subsided, replaced by a single overwhelming feeling that wasn't his own gratitude. The moment was broken by a sharp, chitinous click. Prefect Vorlag and 2 Cathar enforcers stood over them. Vorlag's gaze was hard as obsidian, fixed not on the Glimmerfin, but on Leo. "You have violated Section 4, Paragraph 7 of the Human Cathar Colonial Accord, Vorlag," stated his voice devoid of any emotion. "Willful interaction with designated unclean fauna." "He was saving a life," Mark Vance protested, stepping in front of his son. "It was an act of compassion." "Compassion is an inefficiency," Vorlag countered flatly. "You have potentially contaminated yourself and this entire settlement, human Leo Vance. By our laws, the blight must be purged, and its contaminator must be isolated." One of the enforcers raised a plasma lance, its tip glowing with menacing heat. It was aimed at the Glimmerfin. "No," Leo yelled, scrambling to his feet and positioning himself between the weapon and the creature he had just saved. His body screamed in protest, but adrenaline surged through him. "You will not kill it." The standoff was absolute, a shivering, soaking, wet human boy protecting a creature considered filth against the unyielding authority of the planet's masters. The human colonists watched horrified and silent. They saw Leo not as a hero, but as a threat, a fool who was about to bring the wrath of the Cathar down on all of them. "Your defiance is illogical," Vorlag said, a hint of menace creeping into his monotone. "The boy is delirious from the blight's toxins. Stand aside." Leo's head was swimming, but his resolve was iron. He looked down at the glimmerfin. Its dozen blue eyes were all fixed on him, and in them he saw not the vacant look of an animal, but a clear, unmistakable intelligence. It knew what was happening. "His name isn't Blight, Leo," said his voice, shaking but firm. I'm calling him Shimmer, and if you want to kill him, you have to go through me." Prefect Vorlag made a soft, clicking sound, the Cathar equivalent of a sigh of exasperation. He lowered his own head slightly, and then gave a sharp nod to the enforcers, but they didn't move towards the glimmerfin. They moved towards Leo. "The creature will be disposed of," Vorlag declared. "But first the source of the contamination will be secured. Seize the human." The Cathar enforcers were brutally efficient. They bypassed Leo's defiant stance, one grabbing his arms while the other pressed a device to his neck. A sharp, cold sensation shot through his spine, and his legs gave out. The world tilted the faces of his terrified father, and the impassive Cathar, blurring into a meaningless swirl of color. His last conscious thought was of the glimmerfin Shimmer being prodded into a containment unit. He awoke to the sterile hum of a quarantine cell. He was lying on a hard metallic slab, stripped of his wet clothes, and dressed in a loose-fitting grey tunic. A transparent barrier separated his small room from an identical one across a narrow corridor. In that other room, on a similar slab, lay Shimmer. A medical drone floated near him, its scanner casting a blue light over his body. A synthesized voice echoed in the small space. Subject Leo Vance, human, vitals stable. Detected anomalous biosignature in bloodstream. Mild neurotoxin consistent with glimmerfin scetus. Recommend continued observation. Neurotoxin. The word sent a chill through him, but he felt surprisingly clear-headed. The dizziness was gone. The whispers in his mind were silent. He sat up, his muscles aching as if he'd run a marathon. Across the corridor, Shimmer stirred. It lifted its head, its dozen eyes blinking slowly. They found Leo's, and a low humming vibration filled the sterile air. This time, without the panic and the cold of the river, the sensation was different. It wasn't an assault. It was a question. A feeling of cautious inquiry washed over him, a mental image of his own face flashing briefly in his mind's eye. "Hello," Leo whispered, his voice hoarse. The humming intensified slightly, and another image appeared in his thoughts. The river, the sharp crystal, the pain. It was a memory, but it wasn't his. It was Shimmer's. You're showing me what happened?" Leo breathed, his heart pounding. "You're not just an animal, are you?" In response, a complex wave of emotion flowed from the creature. It was more than simple gratitude. It was a tapestry of fear, relief, loneliness, and a deep, ancient sorrow that felt vast and oceanic. The Cathar weren't just wrong. Their entire understanding of this creature was a catastrophic lie. Over the next 3 days, a strange routine formed in the silent quarantine wing. Leo was given nutrient paste and water by automated systems. Drones took his vitals every hour. His father appeared on a comm screen once a day, his face etched with worry. "Leo, are you all right?" "They won't let me see you," Mark said, his voice tight with anxiety. "I'm talking to the colony administrator, trying to negotiate with Vorlag. He's being intractable. He keeps calling this a matter of planetary security." "I'm fine, Dad," Leo insisted, though he knew his father wouldn't believe him. "Don't worry, and don't let them hurt Shimmer." "Shimmer, Leo's son. You can't get attached to that thing. The Cathar are serious. The best I can do is get you out of here. They're talking about deporting you, sending you back to Earth on the next freighter." The threat hung in the air, But Leo's focus was elsewhere. His real education was happening in the silent hours between his father's calls. He and Shimmer were learning to communicate. It wasn't a language of words. It was a language of pure feeling, of raw sensory data. Shimmer would send him images, emotions, even sounds and smells. Leo learned that the neurotoxin was a biological medium for this telepathic exchange. To a mind not receptive to it like the Cathars, it was just noise, a painful psychic static that caused disorientation and paranoia. But to Leo, whose human brain was apparently more pliable, it was becoming a conversation. He learned that Shimmer was young. He saw flashes of its life, the warm, dark caverns he'd glimpsed in the river. He felt its connection to a larger group, a family, a consciousness. It was like Shimmer was a single cell temporarily severed from a much larger organism. The sorrow he felt from it was the pain of that separation. In turn, Leo opened his own mind. He thought of Earth of blue skies, and green grass of his mother's face, of the feeling of running until his lungs burned. Shimmer would respond with a feeling of gentle curiosity, a sense of wonder at this creature, this human who was so different, yet felt so familiar. One evening, Leo was pressing his hand against the cool transparency of his cell, looking at Shimmer, who had its own webbed appendage pressed to the barrier on its side. He focused, trying to ask the most important question. Why were you out there? Why were you alone? The response was immediate and overwhelming. A jolt of pure terror, sharper than anything he'd felt before, shot through him. He saw an image of the riverbank not as he had seen it, but from Shimmer's perspective, lower to the ground. He saw the base of a crystalline tree, and he saw a figure. It was a Cathar. The Cathar wasn't just observing. It was holding a long metallic pole. It jabbed the pole forward, striking Shimmer, pushing it off the bank and into the churning Chroma River. It wasn't an accident. Shimmer had been attacked, pushed in deliberately. Then a second more powerful vision flooded Leo's mind. It was the reason Shimmer had been near the river in the first place. It was searching for something. He saw an object, a crystal, but different from the ones that grew everywhere. This one was smaller, the size of a human heart, and it pulsed with an intense, internal blue light. It radiated a feeling of profound importance, like a holy relic or a family heirloom. He saw the crystal tumbling, falling from a ledge, and landing in the river's murky depths. Shimmer hadn't just been in danger, it had been on a sacred mission, a mission that had been violently interrupted. The weight of the revelation settled on Leo. This wasn't a simple case of prejudice. Someone had tried to murder a child to stop it from retrieving something vital. His comm screen buzzed to life. It was his father again, but his face was grim. Leo, I have bad news. Prefect Vorlag has made his final decision. The quarantine ends tomorrow at dawn. You're to be confined to quarters pending your deportation hearing, and Shimmer Leo asked, his stomach clenching. Mark Vance couldn't meet his son's eyes. The creature is scheduled for sanitary incineration. Leo, I'm so sorry. There's nothing I can do. The connection ended, leaving Leo in the crushing silence of his cell. Across the way, Shimmer hummed a low, mournful note. It had felt his despair. Desperation clawed at Leo's throat. He was out of time. He had to do something. He had to tell someone the truth. But who would ever believe the ravings of a contaminated boy speaking for a creature everyone believed was a monster? Panic was a cold fire in Leo's veins. He had less than 10 hours until the Cathar came to kill his friend and effectively silence the truth forever. Pacing his small cell, he racked his brain. His father was defeated. The colony administrator was a politician who wouldn't risk Cathar displeasure. He was alone. He pressed his forehead against the transparent barrier. Shimmer watched him, its blue eyes filled with a shared sense of dread. Leo projected his desperation, his feeling of being trapped. I need help, an ally, someone who sees things differently. An image coalesced in his mind, sent from Shimmer. It was a fleeting impression drawn from Leo's own memories, but highlighted with Shimmer's focus. It was the face of a human, an older man with kind eyes, a messy shock of grey hair and dirt under his fingernails. Dr. Oris Thorne. Dr. Thorne was the colony's chief xenobotanist, a man as eccentric as he was brilliant. He preferred the company of Xylos's crystalline flora to that of people. The other colonists considered him a bit of a recluse, a harmless crank who spent his days cataloguing alien moss. But Leo had worked with him once on a soil reclamation project and remembered him differently. Thorne didn't just study Xylos, he listened to it. He spoke of the planet as a single interconnected organism. He was the one person who might just be crazy enough to believe Leo. The comms are monitored, Leo whispered to himself. I can't just call him. He needed to get a message out. He looked around his sterile cell. There was nothing. Just the slab, the tunic, and the medical drone that floated silently in the corner, its blue scanner light sweeping the room rhythmically. The drone. An idea desperate and probably foolish sparked in his mind. He walked over to the drone. Run a full diagnostic on my bloodstream, he commanded. The drone whirred and extended a microneedle. Procedure unnecessary, already scheduled. Run it now, I feel. Dizzy again, Leo lied, trying to sound convincing. The drone processed his command and complied. As the needle pricked his arm, he focused all his concentration on Shimmer. Show me the crystal again. The important one. Show me exactly what it looks like. Shimmer obliged. The image of the heart-sized pulsing blue crystal filled Leo's mind, sharp and clear. He held that image, pouring all his mental energy into it. At the same time, he manipulated his own biofeedback, forcing his heart rate to spike his breathing, to become shallow. The drone retracted its needle. Anomalous neural activity detected. Tachycardia present, correlating with biosignature fluctuations. Send the full data log to Dr. Oris Thorne for analysis. Leo said, his voice strained. He's the expert on native biological interactions. Cross-reference with planetary geode patterns. It was a shot in the dark, a string of technobabble he hoped sounded plausible. Command unauthorized. Log is restricted to Cathar, Planetary Health Authority, and Colony Administrator Bryant. It's a medical emergency override code, Vance 77. Omega. Leo barked, reciting the generic emergency override prefix his father had once told him about. The drone paused, its internal processors whirring. For a moment, Leo thought it had failed. Then a small light on its chassis blinked green. Override accepted. Transmitting data log to designated specialist. Leo slumped against the wall, his energy spent. It was a ridiculously thin thread of hope. Would Thorne even look at the data? If he did, would he see anything other than a sick kid's rambling brainwaves? Hours crawled by. The sterile lights of the cell seemed to dim as Xylos's twin suns set. Leo sat with Shimmer, sharing a quiet, somber communion. Shimmer showed him more of its world, a community of its kind, living in deep geothermal caverns, their lives intertwined with the planet's energy. They were not animals. They were caretakers, philosophers, a society that existed in silent telepathic harmony. They were the true natives of this world, and the Cathar were the colonizers. Suddenly, the main door to the quarantine wing hissed open. Leo jumped to his feet, expecting to see Prefect Forlag and his enforcers. Instead, it was Dr. Oris Thorne. His grey hair was even messier than usual, and his eyes were wide with a manic excitement Leo had never seen before. He was holding a data slate that displayed a complex, oscillating wave pattern. "My God, boy, you've done it," Thorne whispered, rushing to Leo's cell. He ignored the Cathar guard who stood impassively at the door. "I've been studying these background psychic frequencies for years." The Cathar dismissed them as geological noise, seismic resonance. But I knew it was more. It's a consciousness, a planetary-scale intelligence. He pointed a trembling finger at Shimmer. And that is not a dumb animal. It's a node, a transducer, a living, breathing part of that consciousness. Thorne looked at the data slate again. "When I saw your medical log, the neural patterns, they weren't random. They were a signal piggybacking on your own brain waves. It was transmitting a specific resonance signature. I cross-referenced it with my deep strata scans. It's a perfect match for a unique crystalline structure I've only ever detected in theory. A resonance crystal. It's supposed to be a geological impossibility, a perfect lattice that can amplify and regulate the planet's entire bioenergy field." Leo's heart leapt. Shimmer was trying to get it back. It fell into the river. Of course, Thorne slapped his forehead. The river acts as a dampening field. The planet's voice. It's been growing weaker for weeks. I thought my sensors were failing. They're not failing. The planet is sick. It needs its regulator. Their excited conversation was cut short by the approaching clicks of Cathar footsteps. Prefect Vorlag entered the corridor flanked by 2 heavily armed enforcers. "Dr. Thorne, your presence here is unscheduled and unauthorized." Vorlag stated, his tone colder than usual. "Prefect, you have to listen," Thorne pleaded, holding up his data slate. "You've made a catastrophic mistake. The Glimmerfins, they aren't vermin. They are symbiotic with the planet itself. Killing this one could have consequences you cannot even imagine." Vorlag's gaze was unreadable, but he didn't even glance at the slate. "Your theories are noted, Doctor, and they are irrelevant. Cathar tradition, solidified over 5 millennia, dictates our course of action. This is a matter of cultural hygiene." "This isn't about tradition," Leo shouted, his voice echoing in the corridor. Someone pushed Shimmer into the river. A Cathar, I saw it, for the first time. A flicker of something surprise annoyance crossed Vorlag's impassive face. The delusions of the contaminated boy are growing more elaborate. "It is a pity. The incineration will be a mercy." He turned to his enforcers. "Prepare the creature for transport. Dr. Thorne, you will return to your lab. Human Vance, you will remain here until your deportation." The enforcers moved towards Shimmer's cell. The door hissed open. Shimmer shrank back, letting out a hum of pure terror that lanced through Leo's mind. It was over. They had failed. But as the enforcers stepped into the cell, Dr. Thorne did something unexpected. He wasn't a fighter, but he was stubborn. He moved to block their path. "I cannot allow you to do this," Aris said, his voice shaking but resolute. "As a scientist and a citizen of this planet, I formally protest this action as an act of gross ecological negligence." Vorlag simply gestured. One of the enforcers backhanded Thorne across the face, sending the old man stumbling to the floor, his data slate clattering across the corridor. And in that moment of violence and despair, something new happened. Shimmer, cornered and terrified, unleashed a wave of energy that Leo had never felt before. It wasn't an image or an emotion. It was a scream, a silent, psychic scream of pure, concentrated agony and fear that slammed into the minds of everyone in the corridor. The Cathar enforcers staggered back, clutching their heads, their antennae twitching erratically. Prefect Vorlag himself recoiled, letting out a choked hiss of pain. But it hit Leo the hardest. The scream ripped through his mind, and with it came a flood of new information. It was the key, the missing piece. A vision not from Shimmer, but from the deep collective memory of its species. A memory of the Cathar. He saw the Cathar arriving on Xylos centuries ago. He saw them building their first cities. He saw their early attempts to harness the planet's energy, crude and dangerous experiments. And then he saw the catastrophe, a massive energy overload, a chain reaction that swept through their population. It didn't kill them, but it sickened them, causing neurological damage, madness, and a slow, wasting decay. The Cathar called it the Silent Plague. And in their fear and ignorance, they needed something to blame. Their gaze fell upon the strange, silent creatures that hummed with the planet's energy. The Glimmerfins. They became the scapegoats for the Cathar's own hubris. The tradition of hatred wasn't born from ancient wisdom. It was born from a lie constructed to hide their own catastrophic failure. Leo staggered back, his mind reeling from the psychic blast and the terrible truth it had revealed. He looked at Prefect Vorlag, who was now regaining his composure, his face a mask of fury, and Leo finally understood. Vorlag knew. He knew the Glimmerfins were innocent, and he was upholding the lie. But why the psychic scream faded, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. The two Cathar enforcers were disoriented, shaking their heads, as if trying to clear water from their ears. Dr. Thorne was pushing himself up a trickle of blue, Cathar-oxygenated blood running from his lip. But Prefect Vorlag recovered with alarming speed, his fury palpable. Insolent filth, he hissed the word directed at Shimmer. It dares to strike back. It was scared. Leo yelled, his mind still racing with the historical vision. You are going to kill it. Its biological defense mechanisms are irrelevant. Vorlag snapped his attention, turning to Leo. And your fantasies about our history are a direct result of your mental degradation. You are a danger. He drew a small sidearm from his belt, a sleek weapon that hummed with latent energy. The incineration protocol has been compromised. A direct purge is more efficient. He was going to execute Shimmer right now, and maybe Leo and Thorne as well. Wait! Thorne cried out, scrambling for his data slate. Prefect the plague, the silent plague from your historical texts. It wasn't the Glimmerfins. It was your own technology, wasn't it? An attempt to tap the planet's geothermal energy that backfired. Vorlag froze the weapon held steady. His silence was more damning than any confession. You know, Leo whispered, the pieces clicking into place with horrifying clarity. You know the truth. This isn't about tradition. Why? Why uphold a lie that's 5,000 years old? A strange, almost bitter sound came from Vorlag, the Cathar equivalent of a laugh. You humans with your fleeting lives you cannot comprehend. Tradition is the bedrock of our society. It is the engine of our stability. To admit our ancestors made such a catastrophic error, to reveal that our most sacred cultural tenet is based on a foundational lie. It would shatter our civilization. The chaos would be inefficient. So you perpetuate a genocide for the sake of efficiency? Thorne asked, his voice dripping with disgust. It is not genocide, Vorlag corrected coldly. It is pest control, a necessary, if unpleasant, component of societal maintenance. This was no longer about simple prejudice. This was a conspiracy at the highest level, a calculated act of cultural preservation through the suppression of truth and the eradication of an entire sentient species. The Cathar who pushed Shimmer into the river wasn't acting out of random malice. He must have been one of Vorlag's agents, tasked with preventing the Glimmerfin from finding the resonance crystal. The crystal, Leo said aloud. That's what this is really about. It's not just a regulator. What else does it do? Vorlag's head tilted. The contaminated boy shows a surprising level of perception. A pity it will be extinguished. He gestured with his weapon toward Shimmer's cell. The crystal is a key, a focusing lens. Our ancestors failed because their methods were crude. With the lens, we can finally succeed where they failed. We can tap directly into the planet's core. Unlimited energy. The power to elevate the Cathar beyond our current limitations. Dr. Thorne gasped. You'd risk another silent plague. You'd risk destroying the planet's entire ecosystem for power. The risks have been calculated and deemed acceptable, Vorlag stated. The Glimmerfins, the so-called guardians of this energy, are an obstacle. Their existence is a threat to Cathar progress. With their regulator lost, their collective consciousness is weakened, disorganized. It was the perfect time to secure the planet's resources. But this one, he glared at Shimmer, threatened to undo it all. It was all clear now. Vorlag wasn't just a prefect. He was the leader of this secret project. He was deliberately allowing the planet to grow sick so his people could swoop in and seize its heart. He raised his weapon again. The discussion is over. At that moment, the door to the quarantine wing hissed open again. It was Mark Vance, Leo's father, flanked by Colony Administrator Bryant, a portly man who always looked perpetually stressed. Prefect Vorlag. What is the meaning of this? Bryant demanded, his voice trembling slightly. I have Dr. Vance here, lodging a formal complaint about the treatment of his son. Mark's eyes widened as he took in the scene. Dr. Thorne bleeding. Leo cornered in his cell and Vorlag holding a weapon. Leo, get away from him. Vorlag showed no surprise. Administrator, your timing is inopportune. This is an internal Cathar security matter. It involves a human citizen. Mark retorted, his earlier fear replaced by a father's protective rage. A contaminated human citizen who is spouting seditious lies, Vorlag countered. He saw his advantage. He turned to Bryant. Administrator, this boy, under the influence of the Blight's toxin, has accused the Cathar Empire of historical fraud and is attempting to obstruct a lawful sanitation procedure. He is a threat to the stability of our accord. Bryant paled. The one thing he feared more than anything was a diplomatic incident. Leo Son, what have you been saying? The truth, Leo yelled. Dad, he's lying. The Cathar have been trying to kill the Glimmerfins for centuries to hide a mistake they made. And now he wants to steal a crystal that will give them control over the whole planet. It sounded insane. Leo knew it. He could see it in the administrator's face, in the renewed doubt on his father's. He was a hysterical teenager against a high-ranking official. Vorlag pressed his advantage. You see, the madness is complete. For the safety of everyone, he must be silenced. He leveled the weapon, not at Shimmer, but squarely at Leo's chest. He is the source of the infection. Once he is purged, order can be restored. Mark Vance let out a choked cry. Administrator Bryant looked like he was about to faint. In the cell, Shimmer began to hum a deep, resonant thrum that vibrated through the floor. It pressed its webbed hands to the transparent barrier. Don't give up it. Projected into Leo's mind. Show them. Show them how Leo thought back in desperation. They won't listen. Let me, came the reply. Be the bridge. Leo didn't understand, but he trusted Shimmer completely. He closed his eyes and pressed his own hands against the barrier, mirroring Shimmer's posture. He cleared his mind of fear and anger, opening himself up completely to the creature on the other side. A torrent of energy flowed into him. It wasn't a scream or a vision. It was a conduit. Shimmer was using him, using his human brain's unique pliability as an amplifier. A telepathic broadcaster. The energy surged out of Leo not as a destructive blast, but as a wave of pure information. It washed over everyone in the corridor. It wasn't a sound or a light. It was a sudden absolute understanding. Mark Vance gasped, his knees buckling. He was no longer in a sterile corridor on Xylos. He was standing in a primeval Cathar city, watching as his own ancestors, insectoid beings of immense pride, tore open the planet's crust. He felt their arrogance, their hunger for power, and then the sickening horror as the raw energy of the world lashed back, poisoning their bodies and minds. He felt the shame, the fear, and the desperate political decision to blame the innocent. He felt 5,000 years of a lie. Administrator Bryant cried out, falling to his knees. His mind was filled with the gentle, silent song of the Glimmerfin Collective. He experienced their peaceful existence in the warm, deep places of the world, their role not as masters, but as gardeners tending to the planet's life force. He felt their confusion as the Cathar began to hunt them, their sorrow at the unprovoked hatred, their long, patient suffering. The two Cathar enforcers dropped their weapons, their chitinous bodies trembling. They were experiencing the truth from their own side, the lie passed down through countless generations, the stories told to hatchlings, the ingrained revulsion, all of it peeled back to reveal the ugly, self-serving secret beneath. The honor they thought they were defending was a phantom. The vermin they were taught to despise were victims. The psychic broadcast channeled through Leo and powered by Shimmer laid the truth bare in the minds of everyone present. It was undeniable, an experience more potent than any document, any testimony. Only Vorlag resisted. He roared in fury and pain, clutching his head as the truth hammered against the walls of his indoctrinated mind. No lies. Blight-spawned trickery. He fought against the wave of empathy, his will a fortress of cold, hard pragmatism. He saw the truth, but he refused to accept it. To him, the collapse of his society was a greater evil than the truth of its foundation. Efficiency requires sacrifice. He bellowed, raising his weapon. The psychic wave had disoriented him, but his resolve remained. He aimed his pistol not at Leo, but at the source, at Shimmer. Before he could fire, Mark Vance, seeing the truth and his son's role in revealing it, acted. With a roar of pure paternal instinct, he charged across the corridor and tackled the Cathar prefect with the force of a freight hauler. It was a suicidal act, a soft-bodied human against a carapaced Cathar warrior nearly twice his size. But it was a perfect, unexpected blow. Mark slammed his shoulder into Vorlag's midsection, sending them both crashing against the wall. The plasma pistol flew from Vorlag's grip, skittering across the floor. The enforcers, still reeling from the psychic revelation, made no move to help their leader. They simply stared at their own hands, as if seeing them for the first time. Vorlag, enraged, threw Mark off him with ease, sending him sprawling. He scrambled for his weapon, but Thorn was faster. The old scientist kicked the pistol, sending it sliding down the corridor far out of reach. Prefect Vorlag rose to his full, imposing height, his multifaceted eyes burning with a murderous light. His conspiracy was in ruins, his authority shattered. All he had left was violence. He lunged towards Shimmer's open cell, but Leo was already moving. The psychic broadcast had ceased, leaving him drained but clear-headed. He scrambled out of his now open cell door and stood in Vorlag's path. A boy against a monster. "It's over, Vorlag," Leo said, his voice steady. "Everyone knows. You can't hide it anymore." "Then I will erase the evidence." Vorlag snarled, his powerful claws extended. He swung a massive arm at Leo, a blow that would have shattered bone. But Leo, having spent days in mental communion with a being who perceived the world in 1,000 different ways, felt a strange sense of premonition. He saw the attack not as it happened, but as an intention, a fraction of a second before it launched. He dropped, and the deadly claw whistled over his head. The battle was short and one-sided. Leo couldn't fight Vorlag, but he could evade. He dodged and weaved, using his smaller size and newfound intuition to avoid the Cathar's furious but clumsy attacks. The standoff ended when the two enforcers finally stirred. They looked at each other, a silent understanding passing between them. Then they moved, not towards Leo, but towards their prefect. They flanked Vorlag, each placing a firm hand on his arms. Prefect one of them said, his voice stripped of its usual deference, replaced by a hollow, somber tone. "Enough. The lie is broken." Vorlag struggled, but the will had gone out of him. He looked from his insubordinate enforcers to the stunned humans to the Glimmerfin child watching him with its dozen sad, knowing eyes. He was a pillar of a society whose foundation had just turned to dust. He sagged in their grip, defeated not by force, but by a truth he could no longer deny. Leo, panting, leaned against the wall. His father rushed to his side, pulling him into a fierce hug. "Leo, I saw it. I understand. My God, son. What you did." Across the corridor, Shimmer slowly emerged from its cell. It walked past the defeated Vorlag and the shell-shocked enforcers. It stopped in front of Administrator Bryant, who was still sitting on the floor. The Glimmerfin extended a webbed hand and gently touched the man's shoulder, a gesture of comfort. Then it came to Leo. It looked up at him and projected one final powerful message, not just to him, but to everyone. It was a feeling of hope, of a new beginning, and a simple request. An image of the pulsing resonance crystal resting in the cold, dark silt of the Chroma River. Help us heal our world. The week that followed was a blur of chaotic, revolutionary change. The story of what happened in the quarantine wing spread like wildfire through Prospect's Landing. Administrator Bryant, profoundly changed by the psychic revelation, made a full report to the colonial authority on Earth. The two Cathar enforcers, now acting as witnesses, presented their account to their own high command. Prefect Vorlag was taken into Cathar custody. His conspiracy dismantled his name, becoming a byword for the old rotting order. The lie was broken, but the work had just begun. A joint human Cathar expedition was organized. Leo Dr. Thorne and a team of chastened, respectful Cathar engineers stood on the banks of the Chroma River. It was the same spot where Leo had jumped in, but the atmosphere was completely different. There was no jeering, no disgust. There was only a quiet, focused reverence. Using Dr. Thorne's sensor data, a submersible drone pinpointed the resonance crystal's location within minutes. A robotic arm carefully lifted it from the riverbed. When it emerged from the viscous iridescent liquid, it seemed to pulse with a sigh of relief, its inner blue light glowing brighter than ever. Shimmer was there, accompanied by two other Glimmerfins, who had emerged from the deep caverns now that the threat was gone. They were taller, their colors deeper, their presence radiating an ancient wisdom. They were the elders. Shimmer, the young one, the hero, was given the honor. It took the crystal in its webbed hands and carried it to a fissure in the rock face that Leo had never noticed before. It placed the crystal inside, and with a deep, resonant hum that shook the very ground, the crystal settled into place. The effect was instantaneous. A wave of warmth and vitality washed over the landscape. The crystalline flora seemed to shimmer with new life. The murky Chroma River began to clear its rainbow slick thinning as the planet's ecosystem began to rebalance itself. A wave of pure, clean energy, a feeling of wellness and gratitude flowed from the planet into the minds of everyone present. The world had taken its first clean breath in millennia. In the days that followed, everything changed. Formal contact was established with the Glimmerfin collective, who called themselves the Caretakers. Communication was difficult, relying on telepathically receptive individuals like Leo. But a new language of understanding was being forged, one built on empathy and shared experience. The Cathar humbled, and facing a deep existential crisis, began the painful process of rewriting 5,000 years of their history. They turned to the Caretakers, and the humans not as inferiors, but as partners in healing the world they had all wounded. Leo Vance was no longer the outcast, the troublemaker. He was an ambassador. He spent his days with Dr. Thorne and the Caretakers, learning more about the silent, beautiful language of the planet, becoming the first official human liaison to a species no one had even known was sentient a month ago. His father Mark watched him with a pride that was almost overwhelming. He never again told his son not to make waves. He had learned that sometimes the only way to reach a new shore is to brave the storm. One evening, Leo stood on a bluff overlooking the now clear Cromer River, its currents a gentle, sparkling blue under the light of Xylos's twin suns. Shimmer was beside him, no longer just a creature he had saved, but a true friend. They didn't need to project complex thoughts anymore. A simple feeling of shared peace was enough. He thought back to that moment on the riverbank, the choice he had made. He hadn't known he was saving a person, or uncovering a conspiracy, or healing a world. He had just seen something scared and alone, and decided it deserved to be helped. It was a simple act of compassion, the most fundamental human instinct. And here, light years from Earth, that one human impulse had proven to be the most powerful force in the galaxy. It was a force strong enough to shatter lies, build bridges, and change the course of history for 3 different species. The universe was vast and full of wonders, but Leo was beginning to suspect that the greatest of them all was the simple, stubborn, and utterly illogical decency of the human heart. Leo's story reminds us that true courage isn't about the absence of fear, but about acting in spite of it. It's about listening to that quiet voice of empathy that tells us to help even when the rest of the world tells us to look away. He didn't have a weapon or a grand plan. He just had a core of compassion that refused to be silenced. That single defiant act of kindness unraveled an ancient injustice and forged a new future. It's a powerful testament to the idea that one person's choice to do the right thing, no matter how small it seems, can send ripples of change across a world, or even across the stars. If this story resonated with you, and you believe in the power of empathy to change the world, please support our channel by hitting that like button. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder of what humanity can be at its best. And of course, if you want more stories like this about humanity's place in the universe, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you for listening.